Imagine at work that we could have some of the more honest, authentic conversations, and we would then surface small issues before they became big. Imagine how brilliantly organizations would function if people were treated with that level of empathy and respect and compassion. The ambition of deep listening is that the person speaking unfolds new thoughts and understands themselves better. In doing so, the listener also understands them better, and the two people feel far more connected in a really profound way.
That's Emily Kasriel, author of the book Deep Listening. I'm Leah Smart, and this is Everyday Better. Stay tuned for my conversation with Emily about how to deeply listen and, as she puts it, transform your relationship with family, friends, and foes. Don't forget to hit that follow button to get new episodes of our show every week. And if you want to hang out with me more, you can find me on socials. Finally, if you like this conversation, I have a favor to ask. Leave us a review wherever you're listening so we can keep bringing you more conversations that you love. It means the world to us and tells us that what we're doing brings you value. Hey everyone, from LinkedIn News, this is Everyday Better, a show about the tools you need to create positive change in your mindset, your work, and every other area of your life. I'm Leah Smart, LinkedIn's senior editor and a certified professional coach. I help people become better versions of themselves one day at a time. And every week, I sit down with a trusted voice, so together we can explore how to take small steps toward big changes, the kind we plan for, strive toward, or never saw coming. A quick note before my conversation with Emily. The new year is coming up, and it's right around the corner, which is unbelievable. And our team is working really hard to bring you some exciting new episodes and some new formats to start the year off. So in the lead up to that, and with the holidays coming up, we are going to slow down a bit to get more intentional. Now, we're not going anywhere, but in November and December, we're going to be releasing episodes every other week. So if you notice a change, that's what's going on. All right, that's the end of my PSA, and on to my sit down with Emily Kasriel. Emily is an award-winning journalist, an editor, and a media executive formerly at the BBC. She's also an executive coach and a scholar. And today, we're going to talk with her about a topic she has spent years researching: deep listening. So first of all, what is it? Well, simply put, deep listening is going to help you engage more meaningfully and truly understand other people. Now, I want you to pause and think about the way that you listen now. If you're like me, most of the time you're listening to respond or to get things done. I liken it to feeling like a game of ping pong, where when I think of deep listening, it's a game of tennis. There's a little bit more space to actually grasp what you're hearing and respond appropriately. And I'm going to tell you that as an executive coach myself and someone who takes all of my relationships quite seriously, it has changed my life when I use it. Now, Emily came up with an 8-step framework around deep listening that I'm going to share with you here. First is create space. Second is listen to yourself first. Third is be present. Then be curious. Hold the gaze. Then hold the silence. Reflect back. And last, go deeper. Now, this kind of listening is not meant for every conversation, and I'm going to tell you right now, if you try it, you will be exhausted, and nobody has time for that. But it becomes super useful when there's friction or differing perspectives that we need to get past, but don't really know how. Or maybe you've made attempts at having a tough conversation, which happens all the time at work, but you end up just talking past the other person because both of you are trying to get your own piece in. So Emily's going to share how we can use deep listening to get past the surface level and truly understand each other. Here's my conversation with Emily. So define for us, what is deep listening? What does it look like?
Shall I start with step one?
Yes.
Which is about creating the space. If a conversation is important, for example, and you're in an open plan office, even with a glass door, and you want to find out why a colleague is, perpetually got an issue with timekeeping, not such a good idea. Got to go somewhere where they feel safe so that they feel psychologically safe, and what's safe for them might not be for you. Going out for a walk is fantastic, even better in nature, even better with a bit of water. Teenagers, great to be in the car side by side. Creating the space is about psychological safety, but it's also about the sound. So in this room is a good sound because we've got wood, which is fantastic. Materials, glass, metal, noisy canteen, not so good because people are straining to hear. Or you get sharp overhead blue-white lighting in a lot of institutional, doesn't make us feel relaxed. And even more, how can we make the person feel cherished? So I spent time with Japanese tea ceremony practitioners who do everything. So the very vessel, they will move around so the angle of the most beautiful image is facing you. Or they'll find a fresh bamboo leaf and place it on the water or buy you a special treat. What can you do so that your partner feels cherished? Or if you're wanting to talk to your kid, surrounded by their toys in their bedroom or even under their bed, one woman told me when her kid had an impossible time at school, hiding under the bed, wouldn't tell her why. She got under the bed to be with her kid and really listened to them. Step 2 is about listening to yourself first. So you can't really be in a place to listen to somebody else if you have all these shadows going crazy in your own mind and we try and repress them. But if we take the time to listen to ourselves first, for example, I was talking to a colleague of mine who's a chair of a regional UK energy company, a small one. And on his board is somebody who is an accountant, and he desperately needed the expertise of this guy. But he felt he wasn't able to tap in because every time he tried to listen to him, he felt the guy was talking down at him. And as he was discussing this with me, his eyes looked up top right. He was silent. And then suddenly they lit up. And he realized that man reminded him of his bullying older brother. And when he realized this and understood what was really going on, he was able to have a greater degree of acceptance and then able to establish a collaborative relationship with this individual, which was so transformational. Not best buddies, but he was able to work with him and draw out the insights he needed to work effectively. So I would say if you've experienced trauma, you might need to get some professional help before embarking on this listening to yourself. And maybe also, even if you've not experienced trauma when you're doing this work, find yourself an anchor, something which makes you feel safe, the image in your mind of a favourite place in nature or a pet or someone who really loves you to help ground you. Because it's difficult work and it's a work of a lifetime.
Yeah.
Maybe go for a walk, have that shadow, give it a voice and ask it, why are you feeling so angry, and see what emerges.
Well, this step could be like the step of a lifetime, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It is oftentimes our life's work is to work through these things. I know that the shadow, of course, has roots in Jungian psychology.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about what you're really talking about? I think the example was great, but when we think about like this thing is coming up for me, you're talking about an issue I'm having within myself that I'm projecting onto someone else?
It can be. We often, let's say, if we fear being judgmental, but we don't want to acknowledge it, we will hate another individual because they are judgmental. It's the stuff that we don't want to acknowledge on ourselves, we project onto the other person. So that's part of it. Might also be an unacknowledged agenda you have. Like you think you're just having a nice conversation with somebody, but secretly you want them to feel small because you're jealous. There could be so many different things at different levels, or it could be something about a shadow from our past, even our parents' past that we haven't resolved, that causes us to be fearful of someone. And spending a bit of time and unpacking ourselves before those important conversations that can help us understand why an individual or certain behaviors or things that they say can trigger us. And it may not even be about that individual. It may be about a whole class of people who vote for a political party that we don't like. And then we project all of that shadow stuff onto them. We label them. We don't see them as an individual. And when we deeply listen, we try and connect with their humanity beyond their beliefs. It's not about agreeing with them. And this is absolutely fundamental. So many people fear that listening signals agreement. And once we can allow ourselves to let go of that, then suddenly all sorts of things become possible because we can have a profound understanding without any fear that we need to agree. But in doing so, we might end up having a more complicated idea in our mind and accept that two different narratives might both be possible.
That's a really powerful point. Can you tell me about the other steps? Because I want to hear those before we talk about where this is applicable and where you'd say not necessary.
Yeah. So step 3 is about being present. And this is so fundamental to deep listening, because so often when we're talking with people, we're just looking at our phone, worrying whether we're going to be home in time to pick up the kids from school or see the big game. We're not really there. We're distracted both by the phone, external distractions, but also stuff goes on in our own mind. And I think before having one of these difficult conversations or important conversations, taking even a minute, even a few seconds to take an in-breath and an out-breath and become centered in order to be open and present, because the person knows it. I mean, have you ever at home been on a Teams or at work, a Teams or Zoom call, and at the same time you've got your phone underneath, out of camera shot, checking stuff?
Yeah.
Hey, my hand's up too.
Have, right.
We all have,
Yeah.
We go through the motions of listening. The person might not know we're on our phone, but they feel it.
Yeah.
They feel it in every pore of their body because we're not present. And a lot of people say to me, I don't have time to deeply listen. But even in the small moments we have, we can bring presence to conversation. And I think that's so important. And step 4 is about curiosity. Curiosity is the acceptance that we don't already know what's going on with the other person, what's in their mind, particularly to people we're most intimate with. We've heard it all before. Our kid comes home from school. Oh, the teacher was horrible to me yet again. And you know, oh God, same old story. Yeah, I've heard that before. Yeah, oh really? I'm so sorry to hear that. I'm sure it wasn't that bad. You know, we're both playing a part in a script.
Right.
It's not authentic.
Replaying it over and over again.
Over and over again. Oh God, I would feel stuck, yeah? When we deeply listen, we can be curious and instead reflect. Sounds like you had a pretty horrible time at school. And they say, yeah, the teacher really horrible to me and it's just not fair and she's treating me worse. And when you're reflecting back, you're not saying you agree. You say, so I'm hearing you say that for you it felt that she was really just picking on you. Notice the way I said that you felt, not as if it's fact. And they'll say, well, I suppose they also did pick on, you know, on Jake as well, you know, because they feel heard. And suddenly you're having a real conversation, not sort of that scripted.
Right.
And curiosity, because kids or adults, whoever we're listening to, tell us more, allows us then to develop that empathy and even perhaps respect. And respect for them as a person, not necessarily for their perspective. And step 5 is the gaze.
Right.
Actually, face-to-face, not ideal. Face-to-face usually means you want to kiss somebody or you want to kill them. So it's not ideal if you want to have a really constructive conversation. 60 degrees, there's a lot of research, is really fantastic. Unless you're talking to a First Nation elder or somebody's on the spectrum, you know, holding the gaze as a listener and as a warm, empathetic gaze. So that's the sort of gaze we're talking about. And then step 6 is silence. And hold the silence. A lot of people are very reluctant about silence because of that lack of time, or they say it's awkward. Actually, it's often the listener who finds it awkward. The speaker doesn't. And when I've trained people, you know, in hundreds of countries all over the world, from boardrooms to conflict zones, I often find that they tell me when they're practicing that silence is something they find the most challenging. It's awkward, they tell me. But when I return to them, they say this has made the most difference to their lives, this pause. Because in a pause, somebody can think more deeply. And also you, as the listener, have time to make sense of what the speaker has said. Allows us to reflect in order to reflect back. Many listeners to this show might have been on active listening courses where they learn to paraphrase, reflect back. It's performative. The speaker knows it's performative.
Totally.
Reflecting back with deep listening is a very different thing. It means using the whole of you to make sense of what the speaker has said. It doesn't matter when you get it wrong because you're not holding on to your interpretation. You're offering it as if you're trying on borrowed clothes that aren't quite your own to see what the speaker can then say, it's not that, but it is this. And in doing so, they understand themselves more.
Right. So your job isn't to be right.
Exactly.
As the listener. It's the goal of deep listening is to allow the other person, like you shared kind of recently, to unpack some of what they're experiencing so that they can become clearer.
Absolutely right. Something that so inspires me about deep listening is that if we can provide those spaces, just glimpses of spaces for people to share, it can be so profound. And that reflecting back can also go really deeper. And that's why step 8 is called Going Deeper, and can really unpack motivations and fears and values, which allows a whole different layer of understanding. And it can be really, really profound.
We'll be right back with more about the benefits of deep listening with Emily Kasriel. And we're back with Emily Kasriel, author of the book Deep Listening: Transform Your Relationship with Your Family, Friends, and Foes. Tell me about some of the benefits of deep listening when it comes to our close relationships, but also with our relationships with coworkers, etc.
There's so many benefits, and more research is currently being done into the benefits. So, for example, we recruited 1,000 people in 100 countries, and academics set up a control group, and they found that individuals who practiced deep listening not only felt more connected, not only felt that they were able to be more open and express themselves and more understood, they were also able to re-examine their own attitudes. So when people feel heard, other research demonstrates they dial down what's called their attitude extremity. And that's why it can be so fantastic listening to other people. And you must listen open-mindedly without that in mind. But at the same time, they are more likely to be in a position to listen to you after they feel heard. Because when we feel heard, we're able to drop our defenses. We're able to feel less stress, less cortisol rushing around our body. We're able to, using the terminology created by the late Nobel Prize-winning psychologist economist Daniel Kahneman, move from the systems one automatic kind of reptilian brain thinking to the much more considered prefrontal cortex sort of mind, when we can understand many different perspectives at the same time. And so getting into that place of engagement is so beneficial to our relationships which are most intimate to us, to relationships with colleagues at work. And there's a lot of evidence that organizations and corporations which practice good listening not only increase the mental health of everybody there, they also decrease the number of sexual harassment questions. Also, leaders are felt to be more respected. The efficiency and productivity increase. Workers feel more loyal and motivated. You know, and we all know you don't leave a work, you leave a boss.
You leave your manager.
Yeah,
right?
You leave your manager. So there's so many benefits. And what's exciting is, as I lay out in my book, these 8 steps, it's something that we can all learn to do better, because I believe that we're all in the process of becoming, as Carl Rogers said, who's a psychologist who I've drawn on very heavily in my work. You know, we're not fixed and to be the person that we were last year, last month, or last night. And it feels so exciting that through deeply listening, we can allow the person to have new thoughts and go off script, but we can also progress in our ability to listen. And the other reason that's really motivating for me is that we live at a time of such polarization, and we know that people who are more likely to be all online are less likely to be able to listen, are more worried about listening, and also to feel more unheard. And people get sucked into extreme perspectives in that situation. We can all do more to listen to people who think differently to us in order to connect with their humanity.
Well, I'm curious, you know, you've mentioned the idea that deep listening is important, and you've also talked about a poll that cites that we are not as good at listening as we used to be. Can you talk to me a little bit about, like, what's changed for us and why is it so important for us to have this as a skill?
I think there's so many pressures on people's lives. People are trying to juggle so many plates. And there's the feeling that we need to be efficient. And that's one of the biggest barriers to listening, the feeling that we don't have time. And then coupled with that is the feeling that we need to be in charge. We need to control a situation. And when we really listen, when we deeply listen, we are surrendering control to the speaker. And that can feel very challenging, particularly when we disagree and we're 100% sure we are right.
Because we are.
Because we are. And it feels like a categorical imperative. It feels like we need to express ourselves. If we open the airwaves to somebody else who disagrees, it can feel very, very frightening, as if our morals are at stake, as if we might be contaminated by what we think are their horrendous ideas. You laugh, but a lot of people...
I'm laughing because I hear myself in it. So what are the biggest blockers that keep us from sitting in a space of deep listening?
I think it's often our own stuff. It's not actually to do with the other person. It's to do with our agenda, even stronger if it's an unacknowledged agenda. And it's so often that when we listen normally, we're performative. We go through the act of listening. Actually, what we're doing is we're preloading our verbal gun with ammunition, ready to fire. And a lot of people, particularly parents, but also actually men in the workplace are more likely to do this than women, feel that our role is to solve, come up with a solution. So we listen only long enough to grasp the essential elements of what the person is saying before we come in and say, I know what you need to do. A, B, C, D, all sorted. Or we try and cheer someone up. And of course, in doing these things, what we're doing is we are depriving people of agency. We're making them feel as if their feelings don't really matter and they're left feeling dismissed and misunderstood.
Does the listener get something really, like, aside from, of course I listen to you and I go, okay, great, I've given you this space, right, to talk about something. For the listener, what is the benefit beyond just hearing what the other person had to say?
Beyond the benefit of feeling more connected, which in itself is hugely important, because we know how so many of us are suffering loneliness and alienation. So the ability to connect is hugely empowering for anybody, as well as the feeling of meaning that we get when we help others. But more than that, it's also through hearing somebody make sense of their own story, we are contributing a huge amount. We are co-creating their narrative. Because, of course, as people speak, despite Americans being so glib and fantastic at being able to have short sound bites, that's at a very superficial level. We all need time and attention and a quality of attention to be able to unpack new thoughts. So it is so powerful. Listening isn't just a passive activity. You listen for 5 minutes. Okay, your turn to speak.
That was good.
Great, sorted. It's not at all. You are a fundamental part of the magical new unthinking and understanding which will unfold. And that is hugely inspiring and satisfying. When we talk at this much more profound level, it touches our heart. It changes us. We leave that conversation a new, and I believe, an improved version of ourselves.
If we come back to, I remember being trained as a coach and having these days where we just got to do this over and over again all day. Most of us don't live in that world, right? Most of us live in a world where we're running here, running there, going here, going there, especially at work. Many of us are consistently moving from meeting to meeting and trying to figure out when we do the work that we meet about. And so when you're in that position, as someone who's going, I'm short on time, or as a leader, you're in the position where you're like, actually listening deeply and doing this deep work feels like it's crossing a boundary that keeps me and the person who works for me separate in what I think is a healthy way. What do you say to those people who are like, I don't have time or I don't want to cross this boundary?
Actually, there is research which demonstrate that some bosses like a hierarchical boundary between them and the people who work for them. And they don't want to listen properly because this boundary would be permeated. They prefer being the boss. That doesn't tend to be a tremendously great way to lead. Of course, a boss has got to have a vision, but if they can take the time to understand both the concerns, but also the ideas of their teams, it will be a more informed vision, which is far more likely to get buy-in. Often deep listening, and I don't mean all 8 steps, but I just mean different elements which work in particular contexts, can allow us to be present and to engage even momentarily. But it doesn't mean that we have to do that all the time, because we can't. And there's also the moral and ethical issue of, in a work context, deep listening encourages trust, and people perhaps share more than they intend to. And if you're a boss, you might need to say, whoa, are you sure you want to continue? And you need to treat that information with confidentiality unless you've contracted that it's part of some process. And I think there's also a sort of ethical onus on being responsible about that information.
Sure.
Using deep listening in an ethical way, not to manipulate people or not trying to sell them something that they don't want.
So let's say we're short on time. We can't apply all of the 8 steps. What do you tell people to do?
Take a breath in and a breath out before that difficult conversation. Ask yourself, am I centered enough to really listen right now? And then be truly curious. Understand that you don't already know what the person is going to say, and be open to be surprised.
What if I'm wrong? Even that question, what if I'm wrong about what's about to come out of their mouth? Let's just say that like every single person got your book and we all read it and we all implemented at least pieces of it. What changes for us as a society or in our workplaces or communities when we actually do really put this into practice in a practical way, which means when we can, right? Not all the time, but when we can and when it's most needed.
That's such an exciting question, because I find that so inspiring. Imagine if everyone we engaged wanted and had the ability, when we were feeling vulnerable or needed to share, to be able to listen to us. Imagine if we felt knowledgeable enough and confident enough to engage with strangers when they needed it most. Imagine what the US and other societies would be like if we were able to treat with respect and compassion people, even if they believe things really differently. Because so often the perception that we have, for example, in the US about another political group is often very distorted in terms of what those individuals who voted for that party actually believe. And by engaging more profoundly, we can find out more. Imagine at work that we could have some of the more honest, authentic conversations, and we would then surface small issues before they became big. We would be able to hear the ideas of all these individuals who don't feel confident or safe enough to speak out. Imagine how brilliantly organizations would function if people were treated with that level of empathy and respect and compassion.
Very different than today, I think. I'm sure you've been in organizations where this actually does happen and you've been able to see how it works.
If leaders can practice deep listening, they set an example from the top. It means about them being vulnerable and sharing when they've messed up and setting the tone for other people to share more. It means that when they go into a board meeting or a meeting, they don't speak first, because as soon as they say their perspective, everybody else feels they need to come on board. Therefore, they never really hear the diversity of thoughts and opinions of other people. And I think it's most important for a leader to listen well. And the research evidence is it's most important for people in power to listen, because, of course, that challenges the norm of who's the speaker and who's the listener.
And you're democratizing what happens in a way. You're deciding to say, actually, all of our opinions may matter. Even if we don't come to a perfect agreement that represents everyone, we can actually listen to them and then make decisions going forward.
Exactly. Those decisions are better informed, and people feel a greater degree of loyalty to the organization or the company, but also a sense of vest in the outcome of a process which they have participated in.
Yeah, right. We feel more involved.
Exactly.
Yeah, like we mattered, which is kind of the goal of it all, right?
It's about mattering.
Yeah.
It's about demonstrating to people they matter.
That was Emily Kasriel, author of Deep Listening: Transform Your Relationship with Family, Friends, and Foes. If you like this episode, make sure you check out my conversation with Meg Josephson about how to stay present during conflict. We put that in a link in our show notes, and if you give it a listen, let me know what you think. Everyday Better is a production of LinkedIn News. The show is produced by Grace Rubin, Emily Reeves, Rachel Karp, Ava Ahmadbegi, and Rachel Wong. Asaf Gadron is our sound engineer. Tim Boland mixed our show. We get additional support from Alex Kutsniat-Sova and Mujib Merdad. Sarah Storm is our senior producer. Dave Pond is head of production and creative operations. Maya Pope-Chappelle is director of content and audience development. Courtney Koop is head of original programming. Dan Roth is LinkedIn's editor-in-chief and vice president of content development. And I'm Leah Smart. Thanks for coming with me, and I'll see you next time.